With the women in my network, I'm seeing so much passion through social enterprise, community building, philanthropy, and investing. So today we are joined by three incredible change makers, Aida Davis, Bayley Richardson, and Daryl Trubinsky, who I am delighted to introduce. Aida Davis is a mother, wife, do you want to wave, Aida? Inspired by, let me start over. Aida Davis is a mother, wife, daughter of immigrants, activist, and a founder. Inspired by her ancestors, elders, and colleagues, she created the Belonging, Dignity, and Justice framework as an alternative to the superficial diversity, equity, and inclusion approach. She is leading a movement to create a just and fair society in which all are participating, prospering, and reaching their full potential. She holds a BA in Poli-Sci and African American Studies from UC Berkeley, in addition to a master's from USC in Public Policy and Administration. Bayley Richardson, there she is, started People and Company 5 years ago with partners Kevin Wynn and Kai Elmer Soto. Their mission is to bridge gaps between us by helping people get their people together. People and Company coaches organizations to make smarter bets when investing in the community. Bayley also interviews extraordinary community leaders on the Get Together podcast. And in August 2019, published Get Together, How to Build a Community with Your People, a handbook covering how to build communities today based on the research and strategy work she's done with hundreds of communities. Prior to People and Company, Bayley grew the early community around Instagram, where she was one of the first 10 employees. She has also worked at IDEO, StoryCorps, Pop-Up Magazine, and the California Sunday Magazine. You may have also seen Bayley recently in the film, The Social Dilemma. And Daryl Trubinsky, Daryl, there she is at Senior VP at Weber Shandwick, where she leads digital strategy for some of the agency's largest global pharmaceutical clients and co-leads Weber's overall digital strategy offerings across Weber's West Coast offices. Prior to this role, she was head of digital, social, and experiential communications at CVS Health and Aetna. Daryl serves on the board of directors for the Epilepsy Foundation of Greater Los Angeles and has been recognized as a 40 under 40 by PR Week, Wharton alumni, and brand innovators, as well as a rising star by the LA Business Journal, dedicated to supporting diversity and inclusion initiatives with a focus on women's advancement in the workplace. Daryl founded Northwestern University's Elevate Network, co-chaired the Wharton Women in Business Conference, and founded the Weber Shandwick West Women's Network. Daryl graduated with a BA from Northwestern and an MBA from the Wharton School. She is a dual citizen of Canada and the US. So let's get the conversation started. And I'd like to start as change makers. I'd like if you could each talk about kind of your big picture, what you see as your purpose in life, and what did you see that needed to change? So Aida, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Thank you to my co-panelists and of course to Laureen and Catherine for organizing this as well. Man, what is my purpose? It's like, there's no final answer, but today, sort of what I assess my purpose to be, I think a lot about the people who've come before me and their prayers and their dreams and the things that they have worked for so that I can live a life of, realizing all my dreams. And so when I think about my dreams, where I want to go, I think about most immediately my baby and the children to come and how we create a more just and fair world for those babies. And, a lot of the work I've done to date has been in and with communities. I was a longtime community organizer before starting Decolonize Design, mostly because of my personal experience as a Black woman. And that very much informs sort of my purpose and my calling in life, to really combat systems of oppression and address anti-Blackness and dehumanization sort of head on. So not a direct answer, but there are a lot of things that I feel called to. I guess on a more personal side, I have really indulged in poetry. I really enjoy the arts. And so to the extent that I have time and energy, I really enjoy the luxury of being an artist as well.
Thanks, Ida. So Daryl, both Ida and Daryl became moms during the pandemic, and Daryl's highlighting this, probably the star of this panel. So, Daryl, do you want to share kind of what inspired you for change to make
This was
change?
not planned. It's spring break, so my husband's with our son, and she does not understand that mommy is on a panel. So, hi, I'm Daryl. Thanks so much for having me here, and for the introduction. What is your purpose in life is a big question. So, I would just say that professionally, I think the way I approach my career and the way I find purpose and satisfaction is changing how we all work and live using digital technology as the main tool in doing so, and advancing progress for companies functionally, and also through advancing women's equality and closing the gender gap. Personally, I mean, that's like the bigger question, but trying to create as much of an impact as I can in our time, both big and small impact, and addressing what needs change. I think women have made a ton of progress, in the past 100 years or so. We are now, I think, statistically the majority of the undergraduate level, and are closing ranks in grad school. Like when I went to business school, dating myself 11 years ago, my school had been a big deal because I think it reached like 40% women. And now I'd say at the top, a lot more schools are getting close to the 50% at the MBA, and in like law school, women are the majority. So that's great. But the drop off continues as we get older, with or without kids. And, across industries, we still need much better female representation at the top of corporations that impact all of our lives in ways we don't even realize.
Thanks, Daryl. And so Bayley, how about you, your purpose and what you saw needed changed?
Yeah, I think similar to Ida, I feel like I keep learning more and more about my purpose and what needs change. But the sort of center of what I feel like I care about and I know about and I work on day to day is transforming this perspective that we need to build businesses, organizations, movements, our social lives, whatever, for people. To thinking about how we can build with others. We live in a time where it's so much easier than it has ever been before to communicate with other groups of people, to put your passion out there for other people to raise their hand and say, I connect with that, to coordinate, and to listen. And I feel like there's a lot that we can change if we get better at building with other passionate people, building with others instead of for them. And I can talk maybe a little bit later about my personal background or jump in now with it, but a lot of that's informed by both my work experience and my experience growing up in a house with a mother who was one of the first female pilots, which was really cool to tell people about, but from her day-to-day experience, really hard. And a brother who had learning disabilities. And I think in sort of a subtle way that seeded me with this understanding that not everyone is seen, not everyone is supported, and those people are extremely valuable, even when they're not given a path to participate. But my big center of my work lies in trying to collaborate more, do more partnering, instead of sort of forcing people into systems and boxes that they don't really want to be a part of.
So Bayley, while you're talking, will you expand a little bit, because you shared with us on the pre-call about your mom's experience and how that really inspired you. Can you dive into that just a little bit more? Because I think that really helps give it perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of people on the call have something like this where they witnessed their mother or someone in their family have to walk into a ton of friction just to do what they want to do in the world. And I think my mom's story is one of many of those stories, but my mom's grandpa, or my grandpa, my mom's father, all of her cousins, her brothers were pilots. And my mom learned to fly when she was 16. And she couldn't get a job as a pilot because the airlines didn't hire from the pool of general people. They mostly pulled in from the Air Force, which was mostly men. So even though my mom had been flying for many years and went to school to get a degree in flying, she couldn't be a pilot. So she started working as she was the first female luggage loader at San Jose Airport in Northern California, and cleaned the planes, checked people into the flight. And finally, there was basically a class action lawsuit that forced United Airlines to hire internally. And my mom applied and ended up becoming a navigator, then a co-pilot, and then a pilot. And my experience as a young girl, that really affected me to see my mom in a position that women were told they couldn't have as my kind of core role model. It really opened up the way I think I saw what I might be able to do in the world. And it was always fun to tell people my mom was a pilot. Often, many times dudes would say, I think you mean stewardess. And I was like, no, I mean, my mom's a pilot. But the lived experience for my mom was really gnarly. You know, she would come home and have to vent to my dad about people she was stuck in a cockpit with for 12 hours who did not want her there, who refused to let her do the landing that she was supposed to do because they didn't believe she was competent enough. Or people who, you know, the folks that flag in the planes when you land. My mom had someone refuse to taxi her airplane because there was a woman in the cockpit. And basically just, you know, 1,000 small cuts, some big, some small. And that's the lived experience of someone who's capable, but who just isn't given the space to show up or the support to show up in their work or in their passion. And so I think, you know, seeing my mom be, frankly, a kick-ass pilot and have all of these barriers in front of her made me really feel like making the world fair was something that was urgent and necessary. And then when the world is not fair, it causes vivid, real pain to people that I cared about. So, you know, for me, I think that's opening up who gets to participate in things, opening up who gets to speak up about things, opening up who gets to lead things. And that's like at the very center of what fires me up. And I try to not erase that when I go to work.
Thank you, Bayley. And Aida, can you talk a little, you talked a little bit about what inspired you. And I also would love for you to share a little bit more deeply, and also how you came up with belonging, dignity, and justice, and why that is why DEI is outdated and kind of tone deaf.
Yes, you know, I'm so inspired by both Daryl and Bayley, but Bayley, you remind me about my parents. My parents are Ethiopian immigrants who arrived in this country as political refugees in the 70s. And when they arrived, my mother was a waitress, my father was a janitor. And despite a lot of xenophobia and racism and all the things that they experienced, my dad went on to be a professor and a lawyer, and my mother a sort of healthcare executive. And while it sounds like the American dream, I'm very clear that it was hard, and it wasn't that. And a big part of what my childhood was to acknowledge service workers, to really have dignity, no matter, you know, whether you're the janitor or the CEO, you are valued and you matter. And that was a very clear principle in the way I was raised. And so after going to college, decided to become a labor organizer, where I really worked heavily on the Justice for Janitors campaign, a lot of different campaigns to help people have dignity in their work. So when I think about the belonging, dignity, and justice framework, there are personal stories attached to each sort of concept that, for me, I have either experienced and or worked closely with communities to know that, we really can't build anything, let alone, have a workplace if those things are not sort of fulfilled. And really it was motivated out of a frustration. Creating those three concepts was motivated out of a frustration with traditional design thinking, which can be elitist, exploitative, and extractive. I know, Bayley, you might know, having been so close with IDEO, sometimes
they're the number one offender for sure. Number one offender. They got to get with it.
Man, it's like exhaustingly transactional and slightly paternalistic when it's like, oh, give me all this information. I will go build it for you and come back. I hope you like it, because you don't know what's good for you. That's sort of the implicit thing, the implicit meaning there. But wanting to kind of step away from traditional design approaches and simultaneously think about universal concepts, right? Belonging, dignity, and justice anywhere in the world. Those are understood, well, kind of connected to concepts. And Wendy, to your initial question, like diversity, equity, inclusion really centers dominant culture. So heteronormativity, whiteness, whatever the dominant culture, maleness, right? Whatever the dominant culture is, it's about us assimilating people who are in the outside group of that, being a part of that group. And our framework is inherently about people coming as they are and being valued, and knowing that individuals and institutions make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. But justice says we have vehicles and ways to repair and make people whole and address that in a community context. So we created this in the tradition, like most things of our elders and ancestors, really to build stronger communities. And we are seeing a lot of impact. And I can go into that. I know that's a separate question, but we're seeing some encouraging things there.
Thank you, Aida. This is educational for me, so I appreciate it. So Daryl, would you touch on, you've been such an advocate for women in your career, and now you have 2 kids. And would you touch a little bit on kind of your choices as a career that you decided? And one of the things that we talked about before is kind of the role of money and making some of those decisions too, and just kind of your thought process around that.
Sure. In terms of my career, I started working right when social and digital was really changing how we communicated with each other, as well as how businesses communicated to us. And I've always loved information. And to this day, I still do love how technology has the potential and power to democratize access to that information. Sometimes, the potential isn't how the output is, because, different parties take advantage of it, or, just the way we all work. But I was able to build a career helping companies and people through this era of digital transformation. So much what I do is change management, because you're really just helping people do their jobs in a different way, because it's all being transformed. Like, I think when we think of digital, you think of people in strategy or marcoms or IT, but these technologies affect everything from the way that finance to HR do their jobs on a daily basis as well. I think that to the, I guess like one piece of it, I think something we still see with women at all levels. I'm a founding member of Chief LA, which is a organization for senior level women. But you see this, I'd say, all the way down to junior women, accepting their first job. Is like women still aren't comfortable, I would say, like admitting to themselves or to others that money is a factor. It should not be the only factor. It also comes from a place of privilege to say that. For some people, money is the main factor, and it should be, because they need it. And they didn't grow up with that, and that's perfectly valid. But I think women, men, men are just more comfortable talking about money, asking for money, and, prioritizing it. And I think women, like still, a couple weeks ago, I had a senior level woman ask me if, she got a job offer, should she go back and ask for a little more? And the answer we all know is yes. And I think men, it's just more intuitive because of the way we're all raised. And so I just encourage women to ask for it, because if you don't ask, you're not going to get. And that goes with everything, not just with money, but the promotion, the job, the recognition, and for personally as well.
That's good advice. So Bayley, in all the change and the work that you've done in community, what are some of the most inspirational stories and people you've come across?
So many. So like, just to maybe ground, like I think I've talked a lot about maybe how I grew up and what I care about. But day to day, my work is breaking down how to build a community today. Given that we have a million ways to communicate, you could get in touch maybe with anyone on the planet. Like how do you, what does this word community mean, and how do you build one? And we do that both with organizations and also do a lot of storytelling. So we have a book that just has a 9-step process that if you wanted to start like a basketball team tomorrow, you could pick up and read, and it could help you do that. And we tell inspiring stories about a very widespread group of community leaders on our podcast. So the most recent ones that are going live span from the head of community at Reddit, who deals with thousands of moderators, all basically managing their own sub-sites within Reddit and trying to empower those people to organize their own communities. And the next one we're releasing is a man who started in Kenya a group called Dadding Differently. And when he had his first child, a daughter, he felt like asking his parents or his friends about how to be a better father. Those conversations were always like rife with kind of value systems and personal opinions. And he just needed more peer mentorship and support on navigating being a new dad. And so we scale up and down from these like kind of very large strategic communities to maybe very small personal ones, and try to learn from people that we think are extremely skillful at building communities. Like, what are the things that they're doing that I could teach someone else? So one of the communities that I'll like shine a spotlight on, that is one that I'm surprised more people haven't heard of, and I think is run extraordinarily well, is a community called Girl Trek. It's a grassroots community. Oh yeah, this is like the most incredible group. And if you haven't heard of them, you need to check them out. Yeah, so the story, and it sounds like Aida might even know it better than me, but basically 2 college friends, one of them was a teacher, and they started realizing through personal experience that they were losing women in their life too young. Like they lost a couple of aunts, or close friends lost their mothers. And it was mostly a personal experience at first. And then they kind of started reading statistics of both these women are Black, and it was about Black women's health in America. And it is one of the most sort of like tough health groups to be in. And there's a lot of factors causing that, a lot of systemic factors causing that. And one of these 2 friends, they started talking, and her name is Morgan. She taught a like 7th grade classroom. She was like, how can I go teach these kids, these young girls especially, about history or math when I know that in 10, 15 years, their health might be really at risk, and I'm totally avoiding the big conversation. So Morgan decided to start walking with her students, and then decided, why don't we get their parents involved? Why don't we get their moms involved? And they sent out an email challenging people to walk for like 30 minutes a day for 100 days. And it like 600 people participated. People said walking every day changed their life. It changed their outlook. It changed how they felt about themselves. Groups started forming. People started sending pictures to them. They started a Facebook page. And now there are chapters all around the world. And everyone wears these blue t-shirts. So you might have seen them around in your community. The thing that I think is really amazing about Morgan and Vanessa, who started this, is their main instinct as community leaders was they may have to start the first community, but from there, it's all about empowering other people. in their words, they say, find the shining stars and give them all the tools and support they need to just like run forward with this work. So there are different women who organize locally. There's a woman in, I think, Jackson, Mississippi, who leads like 6 groups and like walks every morning with like 6 different groups of women. And through COVID, Morgan and Vanessa have done live phone calls that all the leaders can dial into and hear them walking with each other with some different people. Like I think Angela Davis like dialed into one. It's pretty amazing. But just to say, like, building a community, we have a framework, which is the simplest sense. It's kind of like building a fire. It's this like metaphysical, magical thing, but there's actually steps that go into building a fire, and there are steps into building a community. And you may have to get the fire going yourself, but from there, it's about feeding the flames and passing the torch and finding people who are really passionate about this purpose that you have and giving them tools, resources, and support to go out and like do it in their communities and push it forward. So anyway, that was like a long girl trek like aside, but they are incredible. And there's like, they're going to reach like 850,000 people soon. 1 million people will have walked with Girl Trek, and it's become like a political force. What started as really just a group of women wanting to change their sort of health outcomes together and walking in solidarity. But it's a beautiful, beautiful group.
That's amazing. Aida, you were shaking your head. Do you want to add on?
I just have the utmost respect for them and love them. I think they're UCLA grads, or at least one is. And yes, I mean, their boot camps, their podcasts, they do a lot, I think, for the mind, body, obviously, and soul. Like there's some real soul work happening. It's like a spiritual experience. So I could not, sort of testify enough in their favor. So thank you for sharing that, Bayley.
Yeah, +1. They're
I would
amazing.
just say, I think Bayley's touching a lot on building community and different examples. As women in business who are about to enter the workforce, or men here who are allies, thank you. You don't have to necessarily start these groups, but be part of them. It's incredibly important to surround yourself with other women who have, similar goal, ambition, drive, and they can inspire you and cheer you along your path. So you feel less alone, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it also shows you different ways and paths to success, and, different people, like how different people interpret it. And it really just broadens your worldview, personally and professionally. Personally, I grew up in some more traditional communities, and having female mentors and peers who share their backgrounds and experiences with me has allowed me to create that own path. So I would just, broaden your circle as much as you can, because it's a very wide world out there.
So Daryl, can you share what risks you have taken and how they've turned out, or mistakes that you have made, and along the way, and what you've learned?
Yeah, I'm joking. Oh no, don't cry. Of course, yeah, sure.
She's so cute.
Oh, thank you. I think that when you're in roles or in positions where you're pushing for change or advocating for change, it's a strong balance to strike in terms of bringing people along with you versus seeming like you're pushing too hard. I have not learned it perfectly. I think you'll always, it's easy to kind of go on the pushing side, especially when you're passionate about something. You feel like, well, this is right. Why doesn't everyone see this? We should all be doing it this way. And that could be true. It's just people come to things at different paces, or they have different priorities, which, shape and change how they view what you're talking about. So, that's a lifelong process. And then sometimes change just won't happen as fast as you want. And you can't, someone told me early in my career, you can't be angry with a company. But, because a company is a group of people, it's essentially a nameless thing. But you can decide, is this somewhere I'm going to wait around, or am I going to tackle my next challenge? We're not in a world anymore where you need to stay at a job for 20 years. If you look at my LinkedIn, I'm an example of that. And so I think that recognizing when it's time to move on and get that next opportunity that's a better fit in multiple ways is a really critical skill as well. Don't get complacent.
So Aida, you are working to make change that's been needed, and there's things that are just set in stone, sort of feel like they're set in stone, and you're trying to move the ball forward and enlighten people. And can you share kind of what challenges you've faced on this journey and kind of how you've overcome them?
Sure. Can I just say that there has been just constant struggle? I'm smiling and laughing because I'm like, I can't think of a time where there hasn't been resistance or friction. But I also know, to Bailey's point of transformation versus change, right? Like transformation requires a little bit of struggle, right? And tension, and that's how we grow. So, at almost every point, thinking about creating Decolonize Design a few years ago, folks, a lot of mentors and people who, elders rather, who saw the work evolving, advised me not to use language like decolonize, and it could be polarizing, and don't critique DEI because it's the best thing that we have, and sort of just stay within the status quo. And it takes, I think, courage and integrity, which I know my colleagues here can speak to, where you just sort of follow your vision. And then when I am in those places, I think of the fact that, a family member, Angela Davis, has, gone through so much and has kept her commitment to being radical, and radical being addressing root causes, right? That's the operating definition of radical, not, extreme. But if we're really trying to address root causes, we have to be courageous and committed to what's really causing things. And so our work at Decolonize Design has often come into not just question, but challenged frequently, because we are unapologetic in wanting to disrupt the status quo. We are unapologetic in wanting everyone to be treated with humanity. And sometimes that is met with a lot of resistance. I think in this moment of dual pandemics of racism and COVID, that is only heightened, right? You see it kind of more polarized. And so change is hard, transformation is hard, but on the other side of it is sort of the butterfly, experience of really being able to be your true self and help others do the same.
So Aida, for people on this call, what advice do you have for us to embrace BDJ?
Yes, I think the first guiding principle I would offer is embracing lived experience. Many of us have degrees here. We've, gone to good schools, and that's important. And that took a lot of work. And there are many people in neighborhoods down the street in, Watts, South LA, who have similar genius and, are deserving of that kind of respect and should be able to come as they are and not change physically, emotionally, spiritually, anything about themselves to contribute in workplaces and communities. And so for us to be actively embracing lived experience is one thing I would offer. I think there are a lot of ways, but if I could leave this group with one, it would be, reframing and valuing untraditional and lived experience as a form of expertise.
Thank you for that. So as I mentioned at the top, this year has been one of change, and it's inspired a lot of the women that I know to look at things differently, and it's affected people differently. Many people have said, we're all in different boats in the same storm. So I'd like each of you to touch on how this past year has affected you and maybe changed your outlook and kind of how you look at life differently moving forward. So Bayley, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the simple question for me as a white person is it's really made me look at whiteness. And I really hope that everyone on this call who is white has also done that in this past year. I think if we haven't done it in this past year, it's like, I don't know what else could get us to do that. And my two business partners are like family to me, and neither of them are white, and my partner is not white. And being in close proximity to people who are not white, both in professional contexts and personal contexts in the last year, that with like reading and seeing what's going on beyond my immediate life has accelerated my understanding of what it means to walk around in my skin, and like how I can be a more self-aware like white person in the world, and also made me just like, really basically question who do I prioritize? Like, what kind of world do I want, and how do I think through, who I'm supporting and who I'm protecting? And this might be like a little political, and I hope everyone doesn't mind me going there, but I really think white women have to really step up, like in this category, like massively. We as women are all here, and allies are here because we understand there is something unique in the experience of not being the dominant group in the workplace. And whiteness is so powerful in that context. And I really feel like I don't need to go on too long about this, but I really want to make sure that I am a better ally. And I think some of that means like making more space, speaking up less, and also just like figuring out, kind of excavating the way I think about who I'm looking out for, who I'm protecting, who I'm supporting. But I just like want to really encourage, like, I think white women, for the future of this country, for the future of like our kids, for the future, like the world can be so much better if we take this seriously and change the way we act in small and big ways. And I hope people on this call who probably are going to go on into like very powerful positions, like do the work, because there's so much information out there right now. And like Aida is a great example of someone I think to turn to learn from. And that's just like really predominantly on my mind for the future of this country and like my immediate relationships, is I feel like I need to be a lot better and keep learning. So yeah, that's too long. I need to like yield space, but yeah, that's what's on my mind.
I get it, Bayley, and I agree with you. Daryl, I'll go to you next in terms of, the last year and kind of how that's affected your outlook.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a different spin for Bayley. Just the last year, I started a new job the week before the pandemic. We went to lockdown here, and I was 12 weeks pregnant, and my new employer didn't know. So it was really challenging, and we're still in it. So, I think we're obviously in a much better place with the vaccines and the rollout and case rates, at least in LA, but it's not over. So it's almost too soon to fully reflect, because we're so in it and just kind of trying to survive on a day-to-day basis. But, I think it's given me a little more space and identity outside of work, because I think prior it's really easy to, have a lot of your identity tied to what you do or what your title is and your position. And the past years just kind of reprioritized a lot of that. And I hope there's parts that we keep, there's been a lot written about this, but being authentic and bringing your full self, whether that's bringing your kid into a Zoom or, just being honest about, how you're feeling that day. So I hope some of that we still keep. And I think you said at the beginning of the call, that it has incited further action for change. I hope that we actually see that change. I think there's been talk about different plans for women or parents. And, we have, I think the government needs to step in and enact that, because we're not going to have true equality in that regard until it's mandated. So a good example is California passed a law, I feel 6 months ago, might be a little less, where requiring public companies to have a certain amount of female representation, and I think minority representation as well, depending on size, on their boards. That law, that was a first of its kind, and companies are now, you see on my LinkedIn feed, every day, new woman of color, like joining boards and things that would never happen if it wasn't mandated. So I'm hoping there's more of that. And I'm hoping that, women in particular, after this past year, think about their partners, if they have partners and they have children, in a different way and demand more. Because there's still too many women that are doing too much, both professionally and personally. And that conversation needs to be had like way earlier in one's relationship, like before you have kids. And, my partner and I have split stuff. I think he actually does more with the kids than I do. So, but, I would say that I'm tired of seeing and sad of seeing women who have so much, going for them, so much capability, they just burn out because you can't do everything in both places.
Thanks, Daryl. And so Aida, if you can answer the question about how this year has affected your outlook, and then we're going to go into a quick lightning round about your one piece of advice for everybody. So if you can answer the first and then the second, and then we'll move on to Daryl and Bayley with the advice so we can get to questions.
Yes, right on. So the first question is about how things have changed in this moment. Yes. I'm strangely an optimistic person. And so while it has been the hardest year probably I've ever experienced to date, the kinds of, it exposed a lot of America to America and put a mirror up to who we really are in terms of our healthcare system, our justice system. Name a system, everything has been put on full display here. And I think that's helpful to both help diagnose where we are as a country collectively, and create solutions that structurally address that. So I guess as difficult as this year has been, we are now, in the words of, Dr. Martin Luther King, on that arc of justice. In many ways. Personally, parenting in a pandemic is, I don't know if fucking hard. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. But this shit is seriously difficult and meaningful. And I'm like enjoying the quality time with my partner and baby, and even my mother, who's now a part of this pod of space and the village here. And yeah, humanity has really never done this in this way. And it's hard. It is really hard. And I think about, and this is the last thing I say on this, I think about our disabled siblings who for so long have been told, like, you can't do this job remote, you can't, all these things that you can't do. And suddenly we found a way. And, my heart breaks because we could have been doing this before, but we all, whether we chose, I don't think I ever chose personally, but I was complicit in a system that allowed that kind of exclusion. So in that way, I'm happy that we're now bringing people into spaces more fairly, and we can have these types of conferences and people can come from all over. I think people are coming from outside of LA and all over, Costa Rica even, without putting people on blast. But yeah, so in that way, I guess I'm optimistic about where we go from here and how we, hold on to what these new changes, but also don't go back to the way things were. In terms of advice, the artist in me is going to encourage everyone to vision board and do creative things. And I really can't emphasize that enough. As fluffy as that sounds, I think that the work of change is both an art and science. And so there is that, you have to, have rigor and discipline and structure and, measurement, I guess, or, kind of have goals and track back against them. And then there has to be room for inspiration and for, the spirit, if you believe in that, or just kind of the universe working to guide you. So I would say, if you all are like I was, which was very like, okay, we got to have goals and kind of type A, really indulge in the more creative side of things. That would be my first piece. And then, so creativity. And then I think all virtues come from courage. And so just to the extent that you're willing to take a stand, stand up for someone else, stand up for yourself. Daryl talks about making demands. Yes, absolutely. That's one tangible way of doing it. So creativity and courage would be my two offerings.
Great offerings. Daryl, along with ask for what you want.
Yeah, I think in all aspects of one's life, you have to advocate for yourself, whether that's your health, personally, with your family, professionally. Everyone's dealing with so much, especially right now. And so they're not going to necessarily know or, have the time to think, always think about other people, but you know what you need. And sometimes it can be really hard to say, you know what, I can't make that meeting at that time because I need my sleep for a medical reason, or I will get back to you at this date, but if you don't say it, then no one else is going to. So say that. And also just knowing what makes you happy. And I think there's a lot, around, I hate meditating. I get bored and, I want to look at my cell phone after 1 minute. So knowing, especially in stressful times, what is going to make you happy and do it. I like productivity, and that makes me feel happy, and it makes me feel some essence of control in this crazy world. So everyone's different, but find out, what are the things that work for you and do them.
Such good advice, because we're always trying to please everybody else. So I think that's really wonderful. Bayley, your advice?
Yeah, I'll just maybe, in the context of the fact that we're at UCLA and the business school, and I'm sure a bunch of y'all have had work experience that kicks ass and you're really good at what you do. I have a friend who is a professor of business ethics, which is something I didn't know existed. And I was like, oh, how do you argue for this stuff? How do you argue for ethics in business? When I was working at Instagram, when we got bought by Facebook, I was at this public company that only wanted to grow and nothing could be argued for if it got in the face of growth. And that left me pretty disillusioned. I was like, well, how do you argue for ethics? Is there data behind this or whatever? And he's like, I tell my students, you can run at your own business. You can work however you want to. It's a personal decision. You don't need to, especially when you're at a smaller business, not one of these giant public things. You can bring the personal into the professional. And I think some of the things that cause a lot of damage in our professional landscape is when there aren't people who are willing to stand up and be moral gatekeepers, because they think the rules of the game in business are different than our human life. And I just want to say, I hope the next generation of folks who get out of business school, like you guys, realize you can advocate for what you think is right in the world in a business context. And the smarter you are at doing that, the more likely you are to convince people. But don't leave your ethics and your morality at the door in how you are as a coworker or in the decisions that your company is making. I think that our culture has been doing that for far too long, and it's going to lead to aberrant behaviors and messed up things in places you don't want to work in. So just bring your ethics to business. Don't leave them at the door. Be a professional in the way that you will be proud of how you operated at the workplace.
That's great advice, all three of you. So Lorraine, do we want to open it up to questions from the audience?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll now transition to the Q&A portion of the program. So encourage all of you guys to check out the Cvent platform and see if there's any questions you would like asked, just to upvote them, or if you have any of their own, please add them in. And if you're not comfortable with coming off of mute to speak directly with our panelists, feel free just to submit anonymously. Let me check this out. I think we do have one question already from Anna Ford. I'll go ahead and unmute you and ask to unmute. And there we go.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, this has been really great, all this talk. I was just wondering, I started a new role during the pandemic, and it's been hard having some of these conversations around race, around diversity with people who, you've met over a video, but it's been difficult to reach out to some people and also just get involved in the community. Any thoughts as to how to approach some of these questions when we don't necessarily have that foundation?
I can jump in, and I think everyone else has some thoughts as well, but this is a very unique time, to your point. To build relationships virtually is so strange. And frankly, if you had told me this would have happened, I was not a believer in the virtual space. I am a new convert. I was like, yeah, there are no real relationships that happen online. Those are just, transactional ones. And I think you can create real relationships, as Bayley was saying, by bringing your whole self. And to the extent that I know something we do a lot of is have sort of relational exercises and kind of conversations about, who are you? Who are your people? Where are you from? Really spending that time up front before you get into work to learning about people and where they're from, and then allowing their sort of cultural heritage and, whatever identity, whatever areas of identity they want to share come out. Something we are very outspoken about is, the idea of being colorblind. We're obviously very far beyond colorblind. We want people to be color brave. We want to invite conversations about our heritage, who we are, where we come from, what's important to us, traditions, those sorts of things. And it allows us to be virtually closer. I'm sure other folks have ideas, but that's sort of how we've been seeing it.
And I feel like coming to the question is meeting them almost halfway.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Ida's one of the people that's thinking a lot about this in a professional context, and there are others as well. A friend of ours started a conference called Allyship in Action that was specifically mostly for allies of BIPOC folks in the ad industry to go to learn about what they're missing and how they can be better. And they have a Slack group, and they have meetings outside of the conference. So I think too, people, this is a unique time to be virtual and be facing up to sort of race and how that shows up in the workplace in more honest ways than I think we ever have. And I think that there are other people who are navigating this, and encourage you to also kind of just see if there's a group you can go get a part of, so that you can kind of just learn as you go and have peers that are also figuring it out, or just people to read from. So just to say, I think I don't know that I have the best recommendation. Ida's probably one of the people that does. And then just there's other people that are thinking about this problem, and you may be able to go be in a community of practice with some other folks.
Yeah, to Bailey's point about seeding space before, Ida is definitely more qualified to speak about this than I am. So I thought her answer was great. And yeah.
So Ida, you're almost saying it's curiosity is probably an asset, because some of us don't realize, we don't know what we don't know. So it's good to ask questions and be curious.
Yes. And I would only preface that with, it's great to have a relationship before asking questions, because sometimes it can feel you can Google that. You don't have to ask me, my burden. But yes, it's kind of this chicken or egg thing, right? How do you create a relationship with someone without asking questions? Yeah. So that's the art of it. Yes.
Well, I have one of my classmates who's actually winning the Alumni Service of the Year award for Anderson. I've known him, we've been friends for over 30 years. And this year we had a conversation about that he had to have a conversation with his son about driving while Black, and how he's been pulled over numerous times, and he had a gun pulled on him because he went for his phone to say he was going to be late for a meeting. And these are things I never knew. And, so I just think there's so much that I haven't been aware of that I think what will help just by being curious, but I agree. I think you need to have a relationship before you start asking questions. Are there other questions?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we have time for maybe one more question. And thank you so much for that, Anna. That was, I think, a really awesome question. So I really appreciated you sharing that. This one was anonymous. I can go ahead and share it. I think it's somewhat related. And it says, how do you approach conversations with people who think that things are okay the way they are right now?
I guess, what's the goal of the conversation? I would say, because if it's to change their mind, sometimes you're not going to be able to, or most of the time. So when I've, dealt with that, I think you have to, it's really hard because it could burn you up, and, everyone has different views. But I think going into it with the clear goal of like, what are you trying to do with this conversation? And also it depends on your relationship with the person, I would say. And then I defer to Aida and Bayley for additional advice, because it's a really hard question.
I 100% co-sign, and I appreciate how succinct you brought that together. I would have said it a lot longer, so thank you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add in there is if you do decide, I really want to change this person's mind, or like I'm engaging. I think storytelling is extremely powerful. I think like operating in the world of opinions and facts and stuff is a very slippery slope, but like landing an issue and a problem in a lived experience, whether it's yours or someone else that you care about, and like the way that that makes you feel, I think is a good way to share like the urgency of something with someone who can't visualize it themselves, or like can't empathize with it. But yeah, be careful who you put your energy towards also.
Definitely. All right, maybe we can squeeze in one more question if that's all right. I think this one I am really excited about, so I'm squeezing it in. It says, truly love all the change that is being created by the three of you. How can we join and work towards creating change in our own communities and circles? I think that's directed towards the change that you guys are creating in your own ways as well.
I could go first. I mean, like, I think the big thing is, we were talking about this before, is like fuel up and show up. So like, make sure that you have the energy and the support around you to like, feel like you're at the stage that you could then act. And then I would say like, get out and participate. Like, you don't have to pick the perfect group, the perfect cause, the perfect whatever. I think action, but like getting involved in something you care about is really important, and maybe showing up as an ally to something that already exists. Otherwise, if you feel like you are the like odd man out, there's no one else like you, or no one else who cares about something that you feel like is blatant or like urgent that you want to act on, I really encourage people to like, this is why we try to teach people how to build communities. You can build the community that pulls people in, that makes other people feel seen who maybe don't or haven't before. And they don't need to be huge, like something small within your company is enough. But I think a lot of people are really afraid about starting groups or starting something like some form of allyship with other people because they're afraid someone won't show up. But every group like has someone who's overcome that fear at some point. So I think, yeah, fueling up, like make sure you have the support you need to then take action, whether it's as a participant or as a leader of something. Those are like the two things that I think I would like urge is like participate, really.
Yeah, I would just sort of add, I think that the reason why we create communities is because we want a sense of mental, emotional, and psychological safety. Like we want to feel like we are cared for and we care for others. And, change, I think, might be a tactic that, when things are out of whack, we create change so that we can have that feeling. And so I guess I would encourage everyone, you can't pour from an empty glass. Do whatever you got to do for you, right? Audre Lorde says self-care is an act of political warfare. I mean, it is so essential to who we are and how we show up. And then, you know, anything can be, any community can be creative around a bowling, you know, like Bayley was talking about basketball or walking or, you know, collector's items. It doesn't have to be, you know, this, I'm going to change the world with this, you know, product or this kind of, you know, business strategy. I think we need to, in organizing, we always say, small is beautiful. What we can do, you know, very in a localized, small way has magnificent sort of impact. So really thinking about first yourself, the individual, and then growing out from there, I think is a great place to start. And, you know, during this time, I just always am emphasizing, which has already been said here, be tender and gentle with yourself. We're all operating under extremely unusual, stressful situations, and that needs to be acknowledged. So let's not put added pressure to be these, you know, what you see on TV or even at conferences, change makers. You know, it's not that.
I think they covered it. Sorry, that's just. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That was so well said. So thank you so much for the responses. I mean, I'm just gonna let that absorb and reflect and yeah, let that settle in. So I think we definitely ran a little bit over time. So I don't want to take up any more of everyone's lunch hours, but I just want to say thank you so much for attending our discussion today on women creating change. A huge, huge thank you to our panelists, Aida, Bayley, and Daryl, and to our moderator, Wendy. This was truly an amazing discussion. I really appreciated you guys being here. We will now have a 1 hour break for lunch. So during the break, please feel free to join the lunch and networking session to connect with other attendees at your leisure. And then join us back at 1:25 for a comedic set to energize yourself for our afternoon. So again, thank you so much all for joining.
Thank you.
Great day.
Thank you.